Want to thanks very much. So I want to say that I really honor everybody who remains committed and dedicated to nursing practice, education, and research during this really difficult time. We need you all. So thank you. So welcome to the first webinar of 2022-2023 for Leadership Management and Policy Interest Group, titled Rethinking Innovation in Nursing Leadership. My name is Dr. Sonia Udod. I'm at the University of Manitoba, and I'm the chair of this interest group. This webinar is being recorded. We have 185 people registered, so we have about 51 right now, and it might take a while until we bring everybody in, and perhaps some people may not show up due to other commitments. So I just want to begin with a land acknowledgement of where I am situated. So the University of Manitoba campuses are located on original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So before we get started, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background as to how this webinar got started and the idea of innovation started. So this concept of innovation really emerged as a result of the pandemic, and through our meetings, we talked about what we can really do to make a difference, and the idea of innovation emerged. And as we began to learn more about the stressors, the burnout, and what's happening with nurses' work, and the shortage became more apparent, there seemed to be a greater need to think differently about leadership and what we're doing in practice. And the notion of innovation is certainly aligns with that. So in our search for our speaker, we connected with Marian Leary's research on healthcare innovation, and knew her work would be a really good fit with our needs and what nurse educators wanted to hear about. So the format for today will be the following. Marian will do a presentation for about 30 minutes, and then this will be followed by a 15-minute dialogue between Dr. Sue Bookie-Bassett, who is the co-chair of this group, between her and Marian, and then we'll open it up for questions from everybody else through chat and raising hands, and I will be monitoring that. So I will be able to help you sort of go through the queue with the questions. Marian has also agreed to share her slides with us, so thank you very much, Marian, for that. So with that, I'm going to introduce Marian. Marian Leary is the Director of Innovation at the University of Pennsylvania School of Nursing. As the Director of Innovation at Penn Nursing, she works to amplify and educate nurses as leaders in health and healthcare innovation. Ms. Leary is a member of the American Nurses Association's Innovation Advisory Committee and a founding member of the Society of Nurse Scientists, Innovators, and Leaders called SONCIEL. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She is a host of the University of Pennsylvania School of Nursing podcast called Amplify Nursing, a contributor to the American Nurses Association official journal, The American Nurse, as part of the My Nurse Influencers column, and a contributor to the Nurse Beat as part of the Innovation Conversation segment. In March 2023, she was named one of 5 female nurses who will go down in history by the Nursing Beat. In May 2022, she was selected as one of the most powerful LGBTQIA+ people in Pennsylvania by city and state. In August 2019, she was named as an influencer of healthcare and a winner in the category of Excellence and Innovation by the Philadelphia Inquirer. In 2017, she was named Geek of the Year for her outstanding achievements in Philadelphia's vibrant geek community in the area of innovation, technology, and activism. So with that, Marian, I will let you get started, and we really look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Great. Well, thank you all for having me. I am very excited to be here today, be it virtually. And I would love to do my own land acknowledgement. I'm coming to you from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is the land of the Lenape people. All right, so let's get started. You already got a very long intro to who I am, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So like was mentioned, I'm the Director of Innovation at the University of Pennsylvania School of Nursing. I do have 2 grants that I'd like to just mention I'll be talking about in this presentation, one through the Rita and Alex Hillman Foundation and one through Johnson & Johnson. All right, so let's get started. What is innovation? So I'd like to set the foundation here so that we're all on the same page. At Penn Nursing, we consider innovation to be the application of something new or the creation of something different used in a rigorous and methodological way to improve health and healthcare. So we're not just talking about technologies or widgets, though those things can be innovations, though they're not always, but really it's the methodologies we use to solve problems, the systems and processes we create, the way that we educate our patients and families, and how we communicate with students. All of these things can be innovation. So why do we need health and healthcare innovation? Well, as we all saw with the pandemic, we need to be able to rapidly create new solutions to emerging problems in a quick way. And as we know, it can take anywhere from 10 to 12 to 15 years or more to get research from bench to bedside. And we really don't have that kind of time. A lot of the time when you're talking about emerging pandemics and other of these wicked health and healthcare problems that we all deal with. And so using a methodological, systematic approach of innovation really allows us to create solutions to problems in weeks to months instead of years. It also really lets us deeply understand what the needs of our end users are, whether that's patients or clinicians, community member, whomever the problem affects. And also, like healthcare, innovation is a team sport. And you really get to work with other interdisciplinary team members who have different experiences, backgrounds, and even lived experiences who can contribute to the learning of whatever health or healthcare problem that you are working on. And so in innovation, we work with engineers, we work with designers, we work with patients and families. Again, whoever can bring that richness of knowledge to the healthcare problem, not just the healthcare team themselves. And, so this opens up a lot of areas of opportunity for nursing education. One of the things that we have identified is that innovation is not necessarily a core component to most nursing school curriculum. Which means that a lot of the innovations, a lot of the solutions that nurses are coming up with in their practice are typically one-offs, meaning that you have nurses on the same floors or different hospitals or different countries creating solutions to the same problem over and over again. Those innovations get lost. They never leave that nurse's practice. And so again, you have nurses repeatedly solving the same problem. You also have a whole generation of nurses who don't see themselves as innovators, even though that's what they're doing every day, creating solutions to problems they're seeing in their practice, using their own experience and creativity to address those things. And so at Penn Nursing, we're really trying to empower the next generation of nurses to see themselves as innovators. And we're doing this in a number of different ways, both curricularly and extracurricularly. And so I'm going to talk about a number of the different programs that we're doing that is educating our faculty, our staff, and our clinical colleagues in the area of innovation and what I'll talk about in a little bit, human-centered design and design thinking. So I'm going to start with the curricular components. So at Penn Nursing, we about, 5 years ago now, created a foundational course called Innovation in Health, Foundations of Design Thinking. This course is open to our upper level undergraduate nursing students as a case study, but also, again, with the lens of we need this to be an interdisciplinary program, we've opened up this course to upper level undergrad and grad students across Penn's campus. And so it is a flipped classroom approach where we have an interdisciplinary classroom of students who identify a health and healthcare problem and then use the foundations of design thinking throughout the semester to address that problem, creating an innovative solution. This is what the classroom looks like. The students do all of their quote unquote traditional learning before they come to class. And then in class, we work through different design thinking activities so that they can work through the phases of design thinking. So I'm sure you're wondering, what is design thinking? Well, it is a 5-stage process that takes the human-centered approach to integrate the needs of the people that you're designing for. So you start with empathy, you move on to define, ideate, prototype, and test. And though this looks like a linear process, you're constantly going back and iterating and going in and out of these different phases so that you're much more able to understand the problem and create accurate solutions. So we sort of think about design thinking. Again, it's an active learning process. It's a bias towards action where you start out with the empathy phase. And in this phase is where you really want to think widely about the problem, who the problem affects, what the health or healthcare topic is, and how you as a designer or researcher can get as much information about that problem to more deeply understand it from the point of view of the people who are experiencing it. So in this phase, we say, you're going to do interviews and observations. You're going to go out and you're going to talk to the people who the problem affects, because as clinicians or researchers, we're not going out and telling people what we think their problem is. We really want them to show us and tell us what they know their problem is so that we can more deeply understand it and then create accurate solutions. And that's where the define phase comes in. You really want to then converge on a problem statement that takes the point of view of the people for whom you just interviewed and observed in that empathy phase and create an accurate problem statement that you can then ideate on, coming up with as many solutions as possible to then create a prototype, test with your population, and then start again. This is really better represented by what's called the double diamond method. So as you see here, when you're starting out your process, you diverge, you're thinking broadly about the problem. When you're defining it, you're narrowing down, you're converging, and then again, diverging and converging during the ideation, prototype, and testing phase. The whole point of this process is that you're constantly focusing on designing the right things and designing the right things in the right way that address the needs of your end user. So during this 5-stage process, again, in the empathy phase, you're starting out with a beginner's mindset. You want to remove all of your own biases so that you can create accurate solutions based on the needs of your end users, not based on what you think they need, but again, allowing them to show you and tell you what they know they need. Again, defining from the point of view of the people for whom the problem affects so that you're accurately ideating and prototyping a solution to the right problem. Again, designing the right thing in the right way. The ideation phase is when you start generating as many solutions as you can to the problem statement. So during the define phase, I have the students write out a problem statement based on the contextual inquiry they did during the empathy phase. And then having that problem statement in front of them when they're ideating, so that they're always accurately creating the solution to the right problem. Prototyping, again, when you create a potential solution to the ideas that will address your problem. And then really important, testing the low fidelity prototype with the people who the problem affects, if possible, in the environment where the problem occurs, so that you make sure that the solution you're coming up with really does address the needs of the user. This design thinking methodology is called human-centered design for a reason. You really want to be collaboratively creating solutions with the people the problem affects, so that they are accurately involved in the process of creating their own solutions together with you. So at Penn Nursing, we created something called Design Thinking for Health. It's a free online open access platform that nurses can use to learn about design thinking and then work through the design thinking process based on existing activities for each of these design thinking phases. This was a grant and built in partnership with the Rita and Alex Hillman Foundation. And we set this up, again, based on the modules of design thinking, but we created original lecture materials, original case study materials, and podcast episodes, all highlighting nurse-led innovation and how nurses can use this methodology within their practice. And so this platform really is an asynchronous curriculum that health systems can use to integrate in existing workshops, or academic institutions can take and create a whole course around. It really is set up so that nurses can learn about this process and, again, use it in their practice. And, we think this is really important because, as I mentioned earlier, nurses are already innovating. They just don't call it that. The nursing process and the design thinking process go nicely together because it's already what nurses are doing. So if you think about the nursing process, you assess the patient, you determine the problem, you make a plan, you intervene, and you evaluate. Well, that's the design thinking process, right? You have your empathy phase, your define phase, ideate, prototype, and test. As my colleague, Dr. Kathy Bowles says, it's nursing process, it's the innovation cycle, it all goes together, which is why this should be natural for nurses, and it is. And we see that every day in practice. I also want to mention that, we are now starting to really think more deeply about health equity and how these design processes can help to infuse an equity-centered lens into the work that we're doing. And so there's this framework called equity-centered design, which takes the established human-centered design and design thinking methodology and includes two new sections: a notice section at the front, which runs through the entire process, and then the reflect section at the end. The purpose of this is that, as, again, researchers, designers, clinicians, we understand what we are bringing to this process, what our biases are. It also, that's the reflect phase. It also asks us to notice who's at the table, what's the power dynamic with the people who are involved in the process you're working on, who's missing from that process, whose voices are not given a platform, and whose are being amplified. All these things are there to help us decrease the inequities in the healthcare solutions that we're creating. And so, we want to be able to make a more just and equitable system for all of our patients. And to do that, we really need to notice how these processes are potentially creating inequities. And so for our Design Thinking for Health platform, we are now, again, thanks to another grant through the Rita and Alex Hillman Foundation, redesigning that platform with a focus on equity-centered design. So coming hopefully in the winter of 2023, we are redesigning that whole platform, and we'll be adding new modules, new lecture videos, all focused around equity-centered design. So we're using that design thinking for health platform in the innovation in health class that I teach to undergrads, but we're also infusing innovation in a number of different ways throughout our undergrad all the way to the doctoral level. So for example, in one of our main undergrad courses for pediatric development, I do an hour-long lecture in that class, and students have to use the design thinking methodology for one of their assignments where they have to create a developmentally appropriate nursing care plan for a patient. And so they run through the design thinking phases in order to help them create that care plan. We also had a faculty member who taught a summer course around innovation and health equity for undergrads. This was a collaboration with the Africana Studies Summer Institute. And so you had, one of our nursing colleagues teaching about, the health inequities and examining ways that innovation can help to improve health outcomes using these human-centered design and equity-centered design methodologies. We also then have, again, infusing this through undergrad all the way to the doctoral level. One of our graduate level classes, which is looking at community and civic engagement, has also started teaching design thinking in that course and incorporating the methodology in one of the assignments that their students have to do in that course. And then the other pretty new program we have at Penn Nursing, just last year, we launched our DNP Executive Leadership Program. And as a foundation for that executive leadership program, all of the nurses in that program have to go through a design thinking in healthcare institute. So the DNP program is a 2-year program, and every quarter they go through a 4-hour course led by myself and Dr. Sue Kime around human-centered design and design thinking to help them drive whatever project they're working on in the DNP program. So trying to really infuse this methodology throughout the entire curriculum. So it's not just a one-off course, but a really thoughtful way to continually educate not only our undergrad students, but graduate and doctoral level students in this methodology. And as you all probably know, a lot of these doctoral and master students are working clinicians as well. And it's a great way to then infuse that back into the variety of institutions where they work. So that's a quick on the innovation education component. I also want to talk now about the extracurriculars that we do in order to also educate our students, faculty, and clinicians around these topics. So one of the programs that we created a few years ago now is our Innovation Accelerator program. So an accelerator is a cohort-based program where you provide funding, mentorship, and education. So we strategically set this up as an educational opportunity so that each of our, so during each of the rounds of the application process, nurses are learning about innovation and entrepreneurship. So round 1 is an online application where the applicants have to write out a problem statement. They have to tell us who their population is, all the things that they would need to know for a sort of business model. We provide information sessions and education sessions on how to create a problem statement and the other components in that online application. Round 2, we have our applicants work on a business model canvas, as well as a budget and budget justification. And again, we work with our Wharton librarians, which is our business library. They do an hour-long information session on how to create a business model canvas, how to fill that out, and how to find the information that goes into those different components. And then round 3 is our final pitch event. Again, we work with our finalists on how to create a pitch and pitch deck. We give them a pitch template, and we also do a pitch feedback session. Again, the whole point of this is really, even if the applicants don't make it into the accelerator program, they will leave this process having learned different components about a pitch, different components about a business model, and about how accelerators could potentially work. For those who do win and make it into the accelerator program, is a 10-month program where they get, again, funding, mentorship, and educational sessions specific to whatever innovation that they're trying to create, as well as get to then work with this cohort of other nurses who are engaged in these areas, learning about human-centered design, learning about entrepreneurship and startup 101, like the variety of these different innovation and entrepreneurship topics. And just as a shout out, we had 4 winning teams, or 4 teams present just a couple months ago for our 2023 accelerator, and we had 2 winners. These drawings were done by Rachel Acker of Health Hero. These were live sketches done during the final pitches. So we had one team, the Blossom team, that is creating a assist device for stroke patients, and another team working on a application for education specific to oncology. All right, so that's our innovation accelerator. And I only have a half an hour, so I can't go into a lot of details, but a lot of the students who take the innovation in health class then go on to participate in other things, such as our innovation accelerator program. So we've had students who took that course, came up with a prototype for a solution, and then applied for the innovation accelerator, won the innovation accelerator, and went on to try and commercialize their idea. So we're always looking for ways to build on the education that we're doing, both in the classroom setting, but also in the extracurriculars that we're offering as well. One of the other ways that we're infusing that is through our new Summer Innovation Institute. So this is launching in June, and it's a collaborative design and co-creation for health equity focus, where we are bringing together, again, faculty, students, clinicians, and community members from around West Philadelphia to participate in this 5-day-long Summer Innovation Institute, where they're going to learn about human-centered design, equity-centered design, entrepreneurship, and other topics around co-collaborative design and innovation. This is a really interesting collaboration between our ADOS, LGBTQ Summer Innovation Institute, LGBTQ Innovation Lab, and our Community Collaboratory for Co-Creation, which is a partnership between Penn Nursing and Penn Engineering. We really think it's important for nurses and engineers to work together to collaboratively design solutions with community members. So Penn 4C really is focused on matching communities who have problems they need to solve with nurses and engineers who can work collaboratively with them to solve those problems. So 2 pretty new institutions at Penn Nursing, but working hard to infuse more innovation and entrepreneurship into the work that we're doing. So another way that we are educating nurses, not just at Penn, but across the United States, is through our Nurse Innovation Fellowship Program. And this is sponsored by Johnson & Johnson. And so working with our colleagues at Wharton, we have selected 20 nurse leaders from across the US who are going to go through a year-long fellowship program, who will learn about innovation, entrepreneurship, and leadership. And kicking off the Nurse Innovation Fellowship Program, these 20 nurse leaders will also attend our Summer Innovation Institute. So again, always trying to build on the different things that we're doing to highlight the work around innovation and entrepreneurship. So it was mentioned that I was a founding member and was on the board of SUNCL. SUNCL is the Society of Nurse Scientists, Innovators, Entrepreneurs, and Leaders. And we do a lot of events related to innovation and entrepreneurship, obviously. We've been doing nurse hackathons for many years now. This was one of the last in-person hackathons we did in November of 2019 before the pandemic. And two of the top 3 place winners were students from the innovation and health class that I teach. So I always like to give shout outs that the students who take our classes are actively engaged in the innovation space and participating in hackathons and accelerators and things like that. So I'm a big proponent that if you expose students and clinicians and faculty to innovation, they will go out and they will innovate. And we see that constantly at Penn Nursing with our students, faculty, and clinicians. So I want to highlight the first place winner here, Anthony Scarpone Lambert. He was an undergrad when he pitched his idea for a nightlight for night shift nurses. So he created this nightlight through and a company called Lumify Care. That company has been incredibly successful since his launch of the company a couple years ago. I think they actually are selling in Canada now, so you can check out his product. But again, he's a great example of he took the innovation in health course, he participated in the hackathon, won first place in the hackathon, and translated that to now what is a pretty successful company. He also was the first nursing student ever to win the President's Innovation Prize, which is a pretty big deal at Penn. It comes with a $50,000 stipend, and it goes to senior nursing students who are willing to take a year off and work on their innovation ideas. Just recently, we had the Nurse Hack for Health, which is also our SUNCL hackathons. And one of our other Penn Nursing alumni, Alana Springer, was one of the winners for that Nurse Hack for Health pitchathon. Again, just examples of if you infuse innovation into the curriculum and you work with students around these topics, they will be more likely to engage in these types of activities. Alana's team, like I said, won one of the prizes and has been extremely successful in the last 6 months, because this just took place in October with raising funds and moving their project along. And so, you know, her project was looking at the topic of redesigning a healthy workplace, which I think is something that we can all strive to accomplish in nursing. So if anybody is interested, the next Nurse Hack for Health will take place September 22nd to 24th, 2023. And just occurred to me that I didn't explain what a hackathon was. So if you're not, if you aren't sure what a hackathon is, it is a weekend-long event where we bring teams of nurses and other disciplines, engineers, designers, entrepreneurs together to try and create solutions rapidly to problems or topic areas that we've identified. And so they usually start on a Friday evening. Teams are formed. You don't have to have your own team. You can get matched to teams, and then you work with that team over the course of the weekend to create a potential solution to a problem. And then you pitch your solution on Sunday afternoon to a panel of judges. It is a really fun time. You get to be really creative. You get to meet other nurses who are interested in innovation and entrepreneurship from all around the world. Nurse Hack for Health. A lot of our events are international events. And so it's a great way if you're interested in learning about human-centered design, design thinking, and hackathons. It's a really great way to quickly start to understand the power of being able to think differently in a relatively safe environment. And so with that, I want to just mention a couple resources. So at Penn Nursing, we have our Amplify Nursing podcast. On this podcast, we talk to leaders in nursing who are working on innovation, policy, practice. So we are in our 7th season now. We are ending our 7th season this week. We're releasing episode 6 with Dr. Lucinda Canty tomorrow. But you can listen to the Amplify Nursing podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or wherever you do your podcast listening. And it's a great way to learn about all of the different innovation, entrepreneurship, and design topics, as well as hear from leaders in this space who are just doing some amazing things in their areas. So highly recommend, if you're a podcaster, to check out the Amplify Nursing podcast. And then just for a couple resources, if you want to learn more about how to create, or if you have an idea how to take that to the next level, or the things you need to do to start a healthcare startup, you can check out the American Nurse column. Like was mentioned, I write a column for American Nurse called Yes and I have students write articles with me as well. So you can check out those resources here. It's all focused on innovation, design, and entrepreneurship. And finally, just this past last year, we published an article on creating an innovation infrastructure in academic nursing. This lays out point by point what we did to create the program that we have at Penn Nursing now. There are a lot of things that take place behind the scenes, a lot of relationships that take building to be able to have a really strong foundation of innovation. So we didn't want to just say we were doing nurse-led innovation at Penn Nursing, but we actually wanted to build a robust program doing that. And then we wanted to make sure that we shared our successes with the nursing community. So if you're interested in infusing innovation into your curriculum and creating an innovation program at your institution, you can check out our paper to see how we did it. And with that, please check out our website. We have all sorts of resources on there around innovation and entrepreneurship and all the different programs that we are working on at Penn Nursing. With that, I am happy to have our conversation and take any questions.
Thanks, Marian, very much for your presentation. It was very exciting to hear all the details that you shared with us in terms of the curriculum, et cetera. And just as Sonia said earlier, I was just going to have a short 10-15 minute dialogue with Marian, and then we'll open it up to some questions from the larger group. And first of all, I just want to say that I met Marian last December at CLCL meeting in Niagara Falls in Ontario. And I was really excited at that meeting because all of the people who were there were all similar to Marian in terms of having this innovative mindset around what I would describe as people willing to take risks, willing to think differently, and willing to engage in really different sort of brainstorming and thinking outside of the box. And in my role as an assistant professor at Toronto Metropolitan University, or formerly Ryerson, I teach leadership. I teach courses related to professional practice. And I was really starting to think about how can we change the way we're educating our nursing students so that they can come out with some of these skills that will lead them to thinking differently, working with different types of interprofessional or interdisciplinary teams. So not just our typical medical or healthcare teams, but as Marian has indicated, the engineering and other disciplines as well. And I've been lucky enough to be able to have some research experience also with engineers and design thinking in my work at our school. And it really does sort of create a different way of thinking, I would say, than nurses have typically been socialized to think about. And so I was intrigued with, learning more about what Marion and her faculty colleagues have created at the University of Pennsylvania. So Marion, one question I had for you was, in terms of the initial, I can't remember if you told us when exactly these courses started around the design thinking, and what's the student response been like in terms of the classroom sort of experiences that you've had?
Yeah, it's so funny. So I launched this the foundational course in the fall of 2018. And now we've been running it for, what is that, like it'll be 6 years. It's the class that I teach has to be capped because there's such interest in it that other classes aren't getting enough students. So I think that speaks volumes. But I make sure to address this with my students at the end of every semester, because this is the way that I teach this class is not like any class these students have had before. And so it's a traditional 14-week class. And I would say for the first third of it, the students have no idea what's going on. They look scared, they're tentative, they're really afraid to break out of that traditional, didactic box that we put them in. And once they start to break out of it, though, you can see the light bulbs go off. They start to get more comfortable, they get more engaged, and they really buy into this different way of thinking and the creativity that comes along with it. And I hear from these students constantly every semester that this is the best class that they've had in nursing school. They wish they would have had it earlier. Again, it's usually for juniors or seniors. And that for the graduate level students, it has changed the way that they practice when they go to work. And it really does help them think differently about what they're doing at the bedside immediately. So the students really are hungry for more classes like this that let them think differently, be creative, and take risks, like you said. Throughout the whole class, they are coming up with ideas that don't work, and that's fine. They try it, it doesn't work, they iterate, they try again. And that's the whole process. I wish we didn't have to give them grades, but we do. And so it's not about the grades, it's about the learning. And, it doesn't matter if they fail because they're learning the process along the way.
So the grades are, sorry, the assignments are geared really around then sort of understanding the principles as you described earlier, as well as the process for, it doesn't matter if the innovation, as you said, sort of isn't feasible or doesn't work, but they learn something through that process of thinking through, right?
Yes. And, I have to say this constantly to them. Don't worry. Yes, I want them they take it seriously, and I want them to take it seriously, and I want them to try and build a solution that is going to address the problem and that will work. But that's not the point of it. The point of it is for them to learn the process and to be able to then take that learning and apply it in other programs or in their clinicals or wherever they work. But again, I do have a lot of students who come up with amazing ideas and solutions and then do try and take those forward. And so, it's a combination.
Right.
But to your point, this is also, an interdisciplinary class. And so we do also get to work with designers and engineers, and that really does help to heighten, the solutions that the students come up with. And so trying to get more of those, one of my main roles in my position is to try and be the bridge between all of these different programs and think about ways that we can collaborate together. So for example, we had a new emergency department open up in our hospital last year. And I have a design colleague who was talking to one of the emergency medicine physicians about bringing in students to help figure out what's working and what's not working. And the design colleague and I have worked together on other projects. So he reached out to me to see if I had any students who could work on this project. So we had 2 students from my innovation in health class work with 2 students from his design class, work with the emergency medicine physician and nurses in the ED to do a real human-centered design project. So the students spent 4 months doing hours and hours and hours and hours of interviews and observations within the emergency department, and then working through the design thinking process that they learned in the classroom. So taking the knowledge that they learned and actually applying it to a real clinical setting to help address a real clinical problem with those healthcare providers. I mean, that's what we're striving for. Yes, it's a class where they're learning the skills of design thinking, but we want them to take it and apply it. And that's what we get to do.
Just in terms of, when you first started this program and launched it, I understand 2 questions here. One is it's an elective, right? So it's not a required course. And second is, how did you get the buy-in from the larger group, the senior faculty or the, within the university, but also the, how did you sort of sell this, if you did, in terms of aligning with competencies for nurses? So, I know the US and Canada, we both have competency-based programs where often our curricula are designed, or, we teach to the competencies, which include assessment, et cetera. But how did you build in this? Because I think that's a really key point. If we're, thinking about our curricula are always so full already. So if we want to add new thoughts, new concepts in, how do we build these into our curriculum at different levels, undergrad and or the graduate, as you've described?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I'm trying to think of where to start. So our innovation in health course, which is a foundational course, the way that we were able to get it into the curriculum, because you're right, we couldn't. Penn Nursing has at Penn the most packed curriculum of any undergrad program at the university. And so there was no way we could add a new course that every undergrad nursing student could take specific to innovation, because you're right, it's not a competency that gets tested for, which is a problem. But that's why we made it a case study course. All of our nursing students have to take a upper level case study. And so this is one of the case studies that they get to choose from. They can also take it as an elective if they want to as well. In terms of buy-in, though, this is where, I got really lucky. I was not working at Penn Nursing at the time, but I used to be a resuscitation science researcher focusing on infusing innovation and technology into resuscitation care. And during that time, started to really think about innovation in healthcare and how it was the nurses who were innovating all the time, and started talking to Penn Nursing, like, we really need nurses to learn about these methodologies. We're the ones innovating, but we're not teaching that in the curriculum. It just so happened that Penn Nursing, our dean, Dean Tony, was already really interested in innovation, and the university was pushing innovation as well. So it was a really perfect timing where I was talking with Penn Nursing about innovation. The university was already talking about innovation, and our dean was already on board. And so that's when, they brought me over to Penn Nursing to start figuring out how to put together an innovation program of substance, so that we could build this foundation and then work toward infusing it throughout the curricula. And because you're right, I mean, it's been a slow process of chipping away. at the very beginning, I got a lot of that feedback, like, we're too busy, we can't create a new course, we can't even give you an hour in one of our standing courses, there's too much to cover, these students are getting tested on so many things, innovation is not a priority. To where now I'm being asked to do guest lectures in like every class that exists. So it took it took 5 years, but like the faculty are starting to see the return on investment that teaching students to think in this way has on their practice and on our students in general. Penn Nursing, is a leader in this space because everybody has bought into it now.
Thank you. I have one more question, and then we can open it to the larger group. So I also, in our conversation the other day, I noticed, or we had a little chat about, what I've seen in a little bit of the literature is certainly more sort of formal partnerships between nursing and engineering schools in terms of trying to, again, sort of spread the different types of thinking, the design thinking, human-centered design approaches. And I just wondered if you had any other comments around that in terms of what you've seen or what you've, again, sort of what is the benefit to the students who do have these experiences?
Yeah, I think it's really important, specifically for engineering, but also design and business as well, to have these interdisciplinary partnerships. So like I mentioned, we have our new Penn 4C, the Penn Community Co-Collaboratory. Always mess that up. And that's a partnership between engineering and Penn Nursing. UMass Amherst has a new nursing and engineering program. I highly recommend, if folks are interested in this partnership, to check that out. My colleague Karen up there is doing amazing work in this area. And there's a huge movement to either have nurses get engineering degrees or engineers get nursing degrees. There are a number of that nurse engineer combination, number of individuals with the nursing and engineering combination out there. We did an innovation colloquium, I think it was earlier this year at the end of last year, that you can find on our website. It was focused on the need for nurse engineers, and we had 3 or 4 nurses with engineering degrees on that colloquium talking about why they went back and got an engineering degree or why they went back and got a nursing degree, depending on where they started, and why that's so important for health and healthcare. It's really fascinating. And I think it's a direction the profession's going to go if nurses are going to be leading in this space, which we are.
Excellent, thank you. So maybe we can turn it over now to the group for some of the questions that people have been, a few questions have come up in the chat. Do you want to maybe go through those, Sonia, and we can?
Yes, I've been following. So one of the questions that has come up just now is from Julia, and she's wondering about the Johnson & Johnson Nurse Innovation Fellowship Program, and if there is anything similar available to nurse leaders in Canada. Would you know, Marian?
I don't know if there's anything, it looks like Sue does though.
Yeah.
But I would say our fellowship just launched. We haven't even announced who the winners are yet. So it just launched and we'll go for a year, and then we'll see how it goes and rethink it next year.
Okay,
We have in Ontario a Nurse Innovation Award that we've had this is our 5th year, and it's an award that's been running through the Registered Nurses Foundation of Ontario, which is an organization that provides funding primarily for scholarships and grants and bursaries for undergraduate and graduate students. But in the last 5 years, the original founding donors of RNFU established a fund, which was a commitment from nurses in Ontario to donate $2,500 each over 5 years. And what we've been able to do is give out about $100,000 each year This is our final year of this particular initiative. And so far the awards can range from like 20,000 up to 40 something thousand, depends on the program. And they've really covered different areas. So some have covered educational initiatives, some technology initiatives, some community practice-based initiatives, as well as some nurse entrepreneurial awards. So that's a program that Ontario individuals have access to. I'm not sure if other provinces have that kind of funding as well. And I know there's some little pockets here and there, but not as big as the Johnson & Johnson one, to my knowledge.
But I will say, for those interested in things like this, SunCL is really a great organization to be a part of. It is international. You can join as a Canadian. And we do events constantly. We have meetups every month. We do these hackathons. We had the conference in Niagara Falls. So if you're interested in innovation and entrepreneurship and the things that we've been talking about today, highly recommend checking out SunCL. Which I'll throw in the chat.
Okay. And so thank you for that. So Norma has a question. I'm curious about the Summer Innovation Institute and if this is open to nurses outside of the US.
So it's actually not even open to anyone outside of Penn this year. So this is our first time doing it, and we intentionally are keeping it small and sort of closed so that we can make sure we're refining what we're doing. And then our plan is to open it up broadly next summer. So, if you're interested in something like that, you can join on the Penn Nursing website. We have an email that I send out periodically with upcoming events. But the plan is to open this up next year. We just wanted to make sure we were doing it right before we open the gates widely. This is our beta version.
Thank you. So we have, we don't have any more questions right now, but I have a question, Marion. So you've talked about design thinking and the presentation was fabulous. So you talked about a student nurse who innovated and developed a nightlight, which sounds like a great idea. Instead of a flashlight, I recall doing that. Do you know of other innovations that have occurred as a result of this design thinking that maybe some of the people from practice might find interesting?
Well, so, I can talk about some of our Innovation Accelerator winners. So we had a clinician who partnered with an engineer to create a detection system for postpartum hemorrhage. So it was a device and an algorithm that detects blood loss in women who just gave birth or are in the process of giving birth, so that they can detect postpartum hemorrhage earlier. Again, that came out of our Innovation Accelerator, and that team then went on to win another internal prize at Penn. They now have an SBIR grant and a variety of other things. They really have taken off. And again, they learned about human-centered design and all these different things through our Innovation Accelerator. Now, they also knew some of these things before. I don't want to say that their success is based solely on going through the accelerator, but if you give clinicians resources, funding, mentorship, they will be able to more successfully launch these ideas that we all have. I'm sure anybody on this call has had an idea when they were practicing that they wish they could have taken to the next level. And that's really what we're trying to do, is just provide, extra support to help them do that.
Okay. So Lindsay, I will get to you. And I don't think that we've responded to Siobhan and her question. So any tips on creating buy-ins for this approach? She feels that most program development involved, that she's been involved in, is very biased and lacks empathy. So how do you try to engage those people at the very beginning to get buy-in into an innovation?
It's really hard. Innovation is such a buzzword. And unless you experience it, it's really hard to have people understand the power that it has for nursing practice. And so we've started focusing on, we were focusing on individuals who are practicing at the bedside. Now we're starting to focus on nurse leaders, and really having nurse leaders understand what it means to innovate, what it means to use human-centered design and design thinking in this way, so that they can really understand, again, the power of it, so that they would be more willing to infuse it into their healthcare systems and support clinical nurses in doing these things, giving them protected time away from the bedside to participate in hackathons, to work on design projects, to do these things that, we're really trying to inspire them to do. But human-centered design is an active learning process, and unless you actively participate in it, it's really hard to express the power of it and how it really works in nursing. So I think, you just have to get institutions to participate and buy in. And I'll also say organizations are now starting to see the power of this. And so at least in the US, the National Academy of Medicine's Future of Nursing report recommends human-centered design and an innovation mindset for nursing education. There was just a book that was published, Taking Action, the top 10 priorities to promote health and equity. Innovation was on that list. Like the ANA has a big push towards innovation. Like organizations are starting to see the power of this, and the more organizations that back it, the more health systems and leaders are going to have to support it.
Great, thank you for that. Lindsay, go ahead.
Hi, Marion. Thanks very much for the presentation. You kind of answered my question actually in the previous one, but I just wanted to say, like, very inspiring. So I'm a nurse. I also have a Master of Design in Strategic Foresight and Innovation. So it's really exciting to see, I graduated from nursing 1,000 years ago, so it's exciting to see that nursing curriculum is starting to embrace the approach. Because when I went back to do a master's degree and I told people I was doing a Master of Design, they thought I was crazy. And so I really appreciate that this is the direction that hopefully other nursing programs can follow suit. And I think one of my questions was around, how do you prepare students in terms of when they go back to their organizations, especially maybe at the graduate level, in terms of how to then translate from learning the skill into practice? Because I work on an innovation team, and I even have trouble sometimes convincing people to try the approach. So any sort of tips on how you help students translate it from the classroom into organizations, I think would be really helpful to hear.
Yeah, so first I'll say I have a accelerated nursing student who is working with me as one of our sort of innovation work studies, who has a design degree as his first degree and is now going back for nursing. So he'll be similar to you, have that nursing and design background, which I also think is so key. Like, you have engineering and nursing, design and nursing. I'm about to defend my PhD dissertation in June. Had I not gone for a PhD, I totally would have gone back for a design degree. And maybe I still will, but for a while. No more education. So yeah, so tips. I think partly what I've already said is it's part that it will be buy-in from health systems and health system leaders. So we need to get them on board. Partly it's knowing that, human-centered design is an active learning process, and it's more than that, it's a way of thinking. And so even if you can think differently in practice about the problems you're trying to solve, that's a good step towards it also. I don't have any great tips other than, it takes leaders and people who've bought in like you to sort of push it forward. I'll say my dissertation is looking at this topic, and I do have some things I can't talk about now, but like there are characteristics, there are individual and organizational traits that support nurses innovating in this way, and that, you know, if we can get organizations on board, nurses can be really successful using these things in practice. I don't have a great answer though on how to get them to do that. It's something that we come across all the time now. I hear this from nurses constantly who want to innovate in practice and have a really hard time doing it at their institutions, especially right now with burnout and the pandemic. Innovation is being de-emphasized instead of emphasized. And I think that's a problem. I think, you know, it might seem like you're taking time away from the bedside to allow your nurses to do these things, but it's an investment in the future. So I think we need to get that across too.
I have found sometimes success in just not telling people what I'm doing. Wow. And so just go through the design, because I think to your point, once you've gone through it and you've lived it and you've seen the value, then people are more likely to say, hey, what was that thing you did? How can we do that? How can we do that for this other problem? But yeah, I think leadership buy-in is absolutely critical. I do have another question, so I'll keep my hand up, but I'll let Sue go next.
Champions like yourself who can push it even at the local level. And the more you push it at the local level, the more you get buy-in from people who've gone through it and now have experienced it and want to use it in practice also. I've seen that a lot at institutions where they can't get the whole organization to buy in, but locally there's champions who see the value in it, do these like human-centered design workshops, get people to take them, and then instantly people are converted and buying in. So chipping away, I think, is a good practice.
Yeah, if I can just chime in here, it sounds like change management is an important piece of this process as well. So Tara has a question, and then I'll go to Sue and then back to Lindsay. So are there any more innovation conferences planned, Marion?
So none outside of what I've mentioned, except for, I mean, not specifically a conference, but the Nurse Hack for Health is coming up in September. And we will have keynote speakers. We will have like hour-long education sessions leading up to it. So they're not your traditional conference. We will be doing like lunchtime learning sessions, and then you know, the hackathon itself, where again we'll have some keynotes and you'll have time to actively work through some of these principles that I've been talking about. But I'm sure SunCiel will be having another conference. I just nothing's been announced yet.
Okay, thank you. Sue.
Yeah, I was just going to add to sort of what Lindsay was saying about the example in terms of having the experience. So I mentioned earlier that I've partnered with some engineering colleagues at our university, so I've been introduced to design thinking through that work, but we've also been successful in getting some CIHR grants to look at a technique called discrete event simulation, which is a computerized modeling simulation. And we're using that to study nurse and PSW workload. And what it does is it creates a model based on the real data that we collect from the units that we're on, but then you can use it to predict outcomes. So you can predict nurse and or patient outcomes. And so we've been doing that in MedSurg, eMERGE, and we're moving now into a complex care setting, but it's a completely different way of looking at workload other than giving out surveys to nurses. And we know nurses have been surveyed enough, you know, around burnout and fatigue and everything else related to workload and stress. And so this is a different, again, it's just a different way of thinking. And if I wouldn't have even been aware of that had I not been able to work with this team. So it's it's that personal example, which makes me passionate too about trying to support how can we build these skills in our nurses as they come through programs. I think another thought I had, it's not a question, but maybe Marion, you could speak to this too, is I kind of feel like if you give folks these tools, it's another set of tools that people have. And maybe through the process of learning about design thinking and that process of going through, prototypes, et cetera, that you can, I don't know, maybe there's some relation to building resilience too, because people don't feel like, oh, it didn't work, but too bad, I'll forget it now, but rather, no, it didn't work, that's okay. Let's try again, or let's try something different, right? I don't know if that makes sense, but just a thought.
Yeah, totally. And I think, that's sort of what I was mentioning before, like the class gives students an opportunity to try things and fail. The human-centered design process is all about iteration and not being so attached to your ideas or your solutions that you can't take constructive feedback and you can't make changes. Like, it's keeping an open mind, being okay with failure, and then saying, okay, this didn't, and also knowing when to say this didn't work, that's okay. And like you said, moving on and using these methodologies to create other things. So for sure, I mean, it's giving you this like nimble mindset that you have the skills. It's not always going to work, but that's okay. At least you now know you can apply this in this setting in other ways. And I think that, healthcare, we get so afraid to tell our students that they can fail because they think, failure means they're going to hurt patients or whatnot. But like, there are ways to do it safely and rigorously that, will only enhance the care they're giving.
Very good. Lindsay. Question. Go
Thanks.
ahead.
My question is actually kind of related to what Sue just mentioned, in that I have this sort of theory that I have been thinking about in terms of design, and that like participants who are part of a design process, like there's also a bit of, I don't know if it's like it is an intervention in and of itself. So we were looking at burnout and, sort of through the COVID pandemic, and that participating in some of those like early workshops around empathizing and understanding, like even without a solution or like an actionable intervention, like a lot of the things you hear, you can't necessarily solve for, but the opportunity to participate in the design process is almost in and of itself an intervention for that problem. So I'd love to know like your thoughts on that. I actually wrote like a commentary as part of a journal issue with a colleague of mine around it. And I think like I really like the idea of exploring that more in terms of patients also participating in the design process and how powerful that can be. So yeah, just would love your thoughts.
So I 100% agree. Paper 2 of my dissertation is looking at that almost exactly. I will say you were on something, and I don't know, am I allowed to tell my results? I don't even know what the said aloud. I don't know. Yeah, we know that nurses who engage in innovation behavior, such as human-centered design workshops, hackathons, nurses who are exposed to them, and nurses whose institutions offer them are more innovative, view themselves as innovators more, are more willing to innovate in their day-to-day practice. Like we now, like it's my cohort, right? In my small population, we've seen that this is in fact what happens. So the more that you expose nurses to these things, the more that they're going to feel confident in doing these things in practice. But more needs to be tested on all of these things. But it's a good foundation for why organizations should invest in it.
Okay, I just wanted to go back to the chat here. Boyan said that this was amazing work and that engaging staff nurses and leadership would be important. to address some of the issues in the system and some of the issues in nurses' practice, and that nursing education should consider following some of these trends. So I agree. I think that here's a wonderful opportunity to try to think a little bit differently, to provide some valuable input into making some changes in our healthcare system. Norma says, okay, talking about design as disruption. I encourage students to think fearlessly and act carefully. Okay. Any other questions? Boyan, yes.
Yes, sorry, I'm just turning on the camera. So thank you, Marianne, Sue, and the rest of the team. It's really interesting conversation. I just wanted to share some feedback. Overall, I've been a proponent and I've talked about improving leadership education at university kind of level. But then one thing that I feel also has to change is the reception of that at the clinical level, because I've been saying to, or we've been saying to students, you need to advocate for yourself, for the profession, for things. We provide examples of leadership, but then when the same students try to practice that in clinical settings, lots of clinical settings are almost kind of the day's too busy, you know, their priorities here, hearing your ideas or kind of you acting now in this role is not always welcome. So I almost feel that a lot has to be done there as well to kind of change the perception of nurses just primarily focusing on day-to-day care. For instance, if they did work in hospitals, to kind of also have some time and really take, consider what nurses have to say, and kind of acknowledging that new role of staff nurses as leaders and take it seriously, rather than kind of we educate and promote it, but still having lots of institution organization who are kind of passively taking that innovation in a way. I don't know if you have any thoughts, but just something that I've been kind of seeing in clinical practice. And I feel that's something that generally is the system we have to kind of work on. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've heard from numerous nurses that their institutions actively block or dissuade them from participating in innovation events or innovation workshops or whatnot, because they think it's not as important as the clinical care that they're providing, or they can't, they're understaffed, all of the things that we know are happening in health systems, which are real. But to my point earlier, I think it's an investment in the future of your workforce and your organization to allow your nurses to participate in these things, because of all the things that we've talked about, how it changes mindsets, how it helps nurses think differently about their practice, and all of the things that we've already mentioned. And that's why we're focusing on nurse leaders in a lot of the programs that we're doing. SunCL just held a hackathon at AONL in California, specifically focused on nurse executives and nurse leaders. This Johnson & Johnson Fellowship, we're specifically focusing on nurse executives and nurse leaders, again, so that we can show them the power of this, so that it can then trickle down to them allowing their staff to do these things. It's an investment. So we're trying.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Any other questions? I don't see anything further. And if there isn't, I will turn it back to you, Sue, for the final words.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Marion, for joining us today. I think you've really given a lot of food for thought, which is what we had hoped you would do, because again, I think we don't always, have the opportunity to have these types of conversations and to allow ourselves to kind of go outside of our typical boxes of thinking. And so I really appreciate that you took the time to spend with us today, and really thank everybody who also came to the webinar to engage in the conversation. And we hope that this has been helpful to you. I know Marion has provided a variety of resources, and she's given us permission to share her slides following the session. So I'm not sure, Saida, how that will happen, but if people have to request it from you, or if they can just, or you'll send it to those who registered.
I can email everybody after the webinar.
Okay, great. One question I did have, Marion, I think you might have addressed it, but you might not have, and I made an assumption. You know, the design, you have the online design thinking module. Is that open to, is that like anybody could take that course? I forget.
Yes, so it is a free online open access course that anyone can take, or anybody can go through, but also it has a Creative Commons license. So anyone can take that whole platform and create an original course around it, use it in an existing workshop. It's there for everyone to use. We want to educate nurses in these methodologies. That's why Rita and Alex Hillman Foundation funded it. It's why we created it. We want everyone to use it. And we know that it is being used all over the country and in other countries as well. So feel free, like I said, we're updating that hopefully the end of this year with equity-centered design lens as well, but it will still have the whole design thinking piece also. So please use it and share widely. I put the website in the chat.
That's great, thank you. I did, since I learned about that, I did include that in a revised curriculum, a course for next year for our undergrad leadership course. So hopefully, you know, we'll get a little bit of integration of innovation in some different ways into our courses. So I think if there's nothing else or no other comments, I think we can probably close our session today. Once again, thank you so much, Marion. And as we did say in the chat, there is a Canadian chapter of SONCIEL now, and if people are interested in knowing more, you can go to the sonciel.org website, and you can look for the info for the Canadian chapter. And Leanne Jeffs in Mount Sinai in Toronto is one of the leads for the Canadian group. So again, thanks so much, Marion. It was a pleasure to have you here, and we wish you all the best with the final stages of your PhD and your dissertation. And well, we'll stay connected for sure. And
Yeah, thank you for having me.
More.
And again, if anybody, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to be a resource however I can. So thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Marion. Thank you, everybody, for joining.